Most people think their Europe trip fails because of money, or bad luck, or language barriers, or travel fatigue. But after traveling across Europe myself, I realized something uncomfortable. Most people don't plan Europe trips wrong. They plan them backwards. They pick cities before systems, flights before flow, hotels before movement. And that single mistake quietly ruins the entire experience. More stress, more spending, less freedom. In this video, I'll show you what most travelers get wrong about Europe. Why the advice you see everywhere doesn't work, and how to plan your trip in a way that actually makes Europe feel easy. Got it? And thank you for saying that. We'll go deep, structured, and retention-focused, not surface level. Chapter 1. What people get wrong before they even book. Most Europe trips don't fall apart on the road. They fall apart at the planning stage, long before the plane ever takes off. The moment people decide they're going to Europe, they do the same thing. They open Instagram. They save city names. They build a wish list. Paris, Rome, Barcelona, Amsterdam, as many places as possible. Then they start stitching those cities together, with flights, hotel bookings, and rigid schedules, without ever asking one critical question: how do people actually move here? Europe isn't a collection of destinations, it's a connected system, but most travelers plan it like a highlight reel. They lock themselves into hotels before understanding train routes. They book flights that cut straight through cities, that are easier and cheaper to reach by rail. They create schedules that look efficient on paper but collapse the moment something shifts. That's why so many people feel rushed in Europe. Why they spend half their trip moving instead of experiencing. Why small delays feel catastrophic. The mistake isn't choosing the wrong cities. The mistake is choosing cities before understanding the system that connects them. And once you see that, you realize most advice about Europe travel starts at the wrong end. Perfect. We all keep the same depth and build the logic step by step so the viewer feels the mistake before you explain it. Chapter 2. How backwards planning creates stress and wasted money. When you plan Europe backwards, the problems don't show up immediately. They show up one by one, small enough to ignore, but expensive enough to drain the experience. It starts with timing. You book flights because they look cheap, then you realize the arrival airport is 2 hours from the city you actually want. So you add a train or a bus, or a last-minute transfer you didn't budget for. Then there's accommodation. You book hotels based on photos and price, not proximity to transport. So every morning starts with logistics, walking to stations, checking connections, rushing so you don't miss the next leg. What looked efficient on paper turns into constant mental math. Then come the hidden costs. It's extra luggage fees on short flights, seat reservations you didn't expect, taxi rides because you're tired and the station feels far. None of these expenses feel big alone. But stacked together, they quietly turn a budget trip into a stressful one. And here's the part no one warns you about. Backwards planning steals energy. You stop exploring spontaneously. You skip neighborhoods because they're out of the way. You eat wherever is closest, not where the city actually lives. By the time people realize something feels off, they don't change the plan. They blame Europe. But the problem was never Europe. It was the order of decisions. Excellent. This is where the mental flip happens for the viewer, so we all slow it down and make it click. Chapter 3. The right way to plan Europe systems first. The moment Europe became easier for me was the moment I stopped planning destinations and started planning movement. They try to bend Europe to their plan. But Europe doesn't respond to force. It responds to alignment. When I planned around rail corridors instead of cities, everything unlocked. Trips became shorter without feeling rushed. Delays became manageable instead of disastrous. And suddenly, places I hadn't even considered appeared naturally along the route. That's when I realized something important. The best European trips aren't packed, they're connected. You don't need to see more places. You need to move through them better. Once movement is clear, cities stop competing with each other. They support each other. That single shift changes how every day of the trip feels. Right on. This chapter is about relief, making the viewer feel how much lighter travel becomes when it's done right. Chapter 4. Why this approach makes Europe feel easier. When you plan Europe around systems instead of spots, something unexpected happens. Travel stops feeling like a problem to solve. There's less urgency, less pressure to get it right, less fear of wasting time. Because you're no longer fighting the infrastructure, you're using it. Miss a train? Another one is coming? Arrive early? You're already where life is happening, near cafes, markets, neighborhoods, and old streets. That's the quiet advantage of Europe's design. Stations aren't on the outskirts, they're woven into cities. So instead of arriving stressed and disoriented, you arrive inside the experience. This approach also removes decision fatigue. You're not constantly checking maps, second-guessing routes, or calculating what a delay will cost you. Movement becomes predictable. When movement is predictable, your mind becomes free. That's when travel becomes enjoyable again, not something you have to manage every minute. Europe doesn't reward control, it rewards understanding. And the moment you stop trying to dominate the journey starts working with you. Perfect. This chapter ties everything together with practical payoff and reinforces your authority through lived experience. Chapter 5. The hidden savings most travelers never see. When people talk about saving money in Europe, they usually focus on obvious things. Cheaper flights, cheaper hotels, budget airlines. But the real savings don't come from spending less. They come from wasting less. Once I planned around public transport systems, I noticed expenses disappearing. No surprise taxi rides. No panic bookings. No paying extra just to fix a bad decision. One rail pass replaced multiple tickets, fees, and stress points. But the biggest savings weren't financial, they were mental. I wasn't constantly checking the clock. I wasn't replanning every evening. I wasn't exhausted from managing logistics. That energy went back into the trip. Better meals, longer walks, spontaneous detours that didn't feel risky. This is the part most travel advice ignores. When travel becomes simple, you stop spending money to compensate for stress. You don't treat yourself to recover. You don't buy convenience to escape frustration. You just move. Calmly, efficiently, and with intention. That's the quiet advantage of planning Europe correctly. Not cheaper travel, better travel. Europe doesn't punish mistakes. It exposes assumptions. The moment I stopped trying to plan Europe like a checklist of cities, everything changed. Travel became quieter, movement became intuitive, and decisions stopped feeling expensive. Europe isn't hard because it's foreign. It's hard when you ignore the systems that locals rely on every single day. Once you stop asking, how do I get everywhere as fast as possible? And start asking, how does this place already move? The answers are everywhere. Public transport isn't a backup plan here. It's the foundation. And when you build your trip on that foundation, Europe stops feeling overwhelming and starts feeling natural. If you're planning a Europe trip right now, this is your reminder. You don't need more destinations. You need better flow.
In my next video, I'll show you how to choose European routes that maximize experience while minimizing costs, including countries and corridors most travelers completely overlook. Watch that next. It completes this lesson.